People don't wake up one day and suddenly become powerful. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design. Most of us live our lives on the surface, reacting, scrolling, comparing. We wait for motivation for the right moment for someone to notice us. But the truth is, power doesn't come from being seen. It comes from becoming. So here's a different question. Why do you want to become unrecognizable in 1 week? Is it to prove something to others? Or is it because deep down, you're tired of recognizing the version of yourself you've been settling for? Because real transformation, the kind that makes people say, "What happened to you?" doesn't start with what you do. It starts with why you refuse to stay the same. In the next 7 days, you won't become someone else. You'll strip away everything that's been holding you back, your excuses, your habits, your doubts. And what's left is someone powerful enough that even you won't recognize them. Not because they've changed who they are, but because they finally become who they were meant to be. Everything begins with why. Not what you want to achieve, not how you plan to do it, but why it matters in the first place. Most people skip this step because it feels uncomfortable. It forces you to confront yourself honestly, without excuses, without filters. It asks you to define a reason strong enough to carry you when motivation disappears, when things get difficult, when no one is watching. Your why is not a goal. A goal is external. It's the number on the scale, the money in the bank, the recognition from others. But your why is internal. It's the reason those things matter to you. And if you don't understand that deeply, your effort will always be inconsistent. You'll start strong, but you won't last. Think about it. Anyone can wake up early for a day or two. Anyone can push hard when they feel inspired. But what happens when the excitement fades? What happens when you're tired, distracted, or doubting yourself? That's where your why becomes the difference between stopping and continuing. A weak why sounds like this: I want to improve my life. It's vague, it's surface level, and it doesn't carry emotional weight. A strong why sounds different. It's specific, personal, and often uncomfortable to admit. It might be the frustration of wasted time, the pain of missed opportunities, or the realization that you've been capable of more but haven't acted on it. It might be the quiet disappointment you feel when you look at where you are compared to where you could be. The truth is, your why should make you feel something. If it doesn't, it's not strong enough. Because when things get hard, logic alone won't push you forward. Emotion will. The reason you choose must be powerful enough to override your excuses. This is where most people go wrong. They borrow their why from others. They chase goals that look impressive, lifestyles that seem desirable, paths that society rewards. But borrowed reasons don't sustain real change. When the pressure builds, those reasons fall apart because they were never truly yours. Your why has to belong to you. It has to come from your experiences, your frustrations, your ambitions. It has to be something that, even if no one else understands it, still drives you forward. Because transformation is not a public performance. It's a private decision. When you define your why clearly, everything else becomes simpler. Decisions become easier because you have a standard to measure them against. You don't waste time debating whether to act. You already know what matters. Discipline stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like alignment. You're no longer forcing yourself to do things. You're choosing to act in a way that reflects who you want to become. And that's where power begins. Not in big actions, but in clear intention. When your why is strong, you stop negotiating with yourself. You stop making excuses that sound reasonable in the moment, but cost you progress over time. You stop waiting for the perfect conditions. Instead, you act because not acting feels worse. Your why also creates resilience. It gives you something to hold on to when results are slow, when progress feels invisible, when doubt creeps in, because there will be moments like that. There will be days when it feels like nothing is changing, when the effort doesn't seem worth it. Without a strong why, those are the moments when people quit. But with a clear reason, you don't rely on immediate results to stay committed. You trust the process because you're connected to something deeper than short-term outcomes. It also forces you to be honest about your priorities. If your why is real, your actions will reflect it. If they don't, then either your why isn't strong enough or you're not being truthful with yourself. This level of honesty is uncomfortable, but it's necessary because you can't build a new version of yourself on top of denial. Clarity of why also removes distraction. In a world full of noise, options, and constant comparison, it's easy to lose focus. But when you know exactly why you're doing something, you stop chasing everything. You become selective. You protect your time, your energy, and your attention because you understand their value. And over time, this clarity compounds. Small actions done consistently for the right reasons begin to reshape your identity. You start to see yourself differently, not as someone who tries, but as someone who commits. Not as someone who waits, but as someone who acts. Your why becomes the foundation for everything that follows. Without it, you're building on unstable ground. With it, even small steps carry direction and purpose. So, before you focus on changing your habits, your routine, or your results, take the time to define your reason. Strip away the surface level answers. Go deeper than what sounds good and find what feels true. Because once your why is clear, your path stops being uncertain. It becomes a choice you make every single day. Distraction is the silent enemy of transformation. It doesn't announce itself as something dangerous. It feels harmless, even justified. A quick scroll, a short break, a moment to relax. But these small interruptions don't just take your time, they take your focus, your energy, and ultimately your momentum. If you want to become powerful in a short period of time, you cannot afford to live in a distracted state. Because power is not built in bursts of motivation. It's built in deep, uninterrupted focus. And most people never reach that level because they never remove what's constantly pulling them away. The truth is, your environment is designed to keep you distracted. Notifications, messages, endless content, all competing for your attention. And every time you respond, even for a few seconds, you break your concentration. You reset your thinking. You slow down your progress without even realizing it. This is why eliminating distractions is not optional. It's necessary. Not reducing them, not managing them, eliminating them. Because partial focus produces partial results. And if your goal is transformation, partial results are not enough. Start by recognizing what actually distracts you. Not what sounds obvious, but what consistently pulls you away from your priorities. It could be your phone, social media, unnecessary conversations, or even your own thoughts. Distraction isn't always external. Sometimes it's internal, overthinking, self-doubt, or the habit of avoiding difficult tasks. Once you identify them, you have to make a decision. Not a temporary adjustment, but a clear boundary. Because if you leave room for negotiation, distraction will find its way back. It always does. This is where discipline begins. Not in doing more, but in removing what doesn't serve you. It means turning off notifications, setting limits, and sometimes completely cutting off access to things that waste your time. It means creating an environment where focus is the default, not the exception. And this might feel extreme. It might feel uncomfortable to disconnect from habits you're used to. But that discomfort is a sign that you're doing something different, something intentional. Most people try to fit focus into a distracted lifestyle. They keep everything the same and expect better results. But it doesn't work like that. You can't build something new without removing what's in the way. When you eliminate distractions, something powerful happens. Your mind becomes quieter. You start to think more clearly. Tasks that once felt overwhelming become manageable because you're giving them your full attention. You also begin to notice how much time you actually have. Time that was previously lost in small, meaningless activities. And when that time is redirected towards something productive, the results start to compound quickly. This is how you accelerate change, not by working longer hours, but by working with greater focus. 1 hour of deep, uninterrupted effort is more valuable than several hours of scattered attention. But elimination is not just about productivity, it's about control. When you remove distractions, you take ownership of your attention. You decide what deserves your time instead of reacting to everything around you. And attention is power. Where your attention goes, your energy follows. And where your energy goes, your results come from. If your attention is constantly divided, your progress will be too. There will be resistance. You'll feel the urge to check your phone, to switch tasks, to look for something easier. That urge is not random. It's a habit. And habits don't disappear immediately. They weaken over time as you stop feeding them. So in those moments, you have to pause and choose differently. Not because it's easy, but because it aligns with who you're trying to become. Eliminating distractions also forces you to face your work directly. Without escape routes, you're left with the task in front of you. And that's where real growth happens. Not in comfort, but in focused effort. It's also where you build confidence. Every time you resist distraction and stay committed, you reinforce a new identity. You prove to yourself that you can control your actions even when it's difficult. Over time, this becomes natural. Focus stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like your normal state. You don't need constant reminders or external pressure. You simply operate with clarity. And that's what makes the difference. Not talent, not luck, but the ability to direct your attention consistently toward what matters. Because in the end, transformation is not about doing everything. It's about doing the right things without interruption. It's about protecting your focus like it's your most valuable resource, because it is. When you remove distractions, you create space. Space to think, to act, to improve. Space to become someone who is not controlled by impulses, but guided by intention. And in that space, change begins to happen faster than you expect. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes without warning. Some days you feel unstoppable, energized, ready to take on anything. Other days, even the simplest task feels heavy. And if your progress depends on how you feel in the moment, you will always be inconsistent. This is why discipline matters more than motivation. Because discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It doesn't wait for the perfect mood or the right timing. It operates on a different principle entirely: commitment over comfort. Most people misunderstand discipline. They see it as something rigid, restrictive, even punishing. But in reality, discipline is what creates freedom. It removes the constant negotiation in your mind. It eliminates the question of whether you should act or not. The decision is already made. When you rely on motivation, every action becomes a debate. You wake up and ask yourself if you feel like doing the work. You hesitate, you delay, you justify, and sometimes you act, but other times you don't. That inconsistency slows everything down. Discipline replaces that uncertainty with clarity. You don't ask if you feel like it. You do it because it's part of who you are becoming. The focus shifts from emotion to identity. And identity is powerful. When you see yourself as someone who follows through, who shows up regardless of circumstances, your actions begin to align with that belief. You stop needing external pushes. You become self-directed. Building discipline starts with small decisions. Not dramatic changes, not unrealistic routines, but consistent actions repeated daily. Waking up at the same time, completing a task you committed to, finishing what you started even when it's inconvenient. These actions might seem insignificant at first, but they are not. They are signals. Every time you follow through, you reinforce the idea that you can be trusted by yourself. And that trust builds confidence. On the other hand, every time you rely on motivation and choose comfort over commitment, you weaken that trust. You teach yourself that your word is flexible, that your goals are optional. And over time, that becomes your pattern. Discipline is not about perfection. It's about consistency. There will be days when you don't perform at your best. Days when you feel tired, distracted, or frustrated. Discipline doesn't expect you to be perfect in those moments. It expects you to show up anyway. Because showing up matters more than how you feel while doing it. This is where growth happens. Not in the moments when everything is easy, but in the moments when it's not. When you act despite resistance, you expand your limits. You prove that you're capable of more than your current mindset suggests. Discipline also simplifies your life. It reduces decision fatigue. When your actions are guided by habits rather than impulses, you save mental energy. You don't waste time overthinking what to do next. You follow a structure that supports your goals. And structure is not a limitation. It's a tool. It creates stability in a world that is often unpredictable. It gives you a foundation to rely on when everything else feels uncertain. Another important aspect of discipline is delayed gratification, the ability to choose long-term progress over short-term pleasure. This is one of the hardest skills to develop because the immediate reward is always more tempting. But discipline trains you to think differently. It shifts your focus from what feels good now to what matters later. It teaches you to tolerate discomfort in exchange for growth. And this is where transformation accelerates. Because most people avoid discomfort. They choose ease, convenience, and familiarity. But those choices keep them in the same place. Discipline pushes you in the opposite direction. It encourages you to lean into challenges, to do what's necessary rather than what's easy. And over time, those choices compound into significant change. There will be resistance. Your mind will look for ways to avoid effort. It will suggest alternatives, distractions, excuses that seem reasonable. That's normal. Discipline is not the absence of resistance. It's the ability to act despite it. In those moments, you don't need to think too much. You need to execute. Because the longer you hesitate, the stronger the resistance becomes. Action breaks that cycle. Even small action, starting is often the hardest part. But once you begin, momentum takes over. This is why discipline focuses on process rather than outcome. You don't wait for results to feel motivated. You commit to the actions that lead to results, regardless of when they appear. And as you continue, something shifts. What once felt difficult becomes routine. What once required effort becomes automatic. You no longer rely on bursts of energy because your system supports consistent action. That's when real progress becomes visible. Not because you did something extraordinary once, but because you did something ordinary repeatedly. Discipline also builds resilience. It prepares you for challenges, setbacks, and unexpected obstacles, because when you're used to showing up consistently, you don't collapse under pressure. You adapt and continue. And that's what separates those who change from those who stay the same. Not talent, not intelligence, but the ability to act consistently over time. Because at the end of the day, motivation might get you started, but discipline is what keeps you going. Your environment shapes your behavior more than your intentions ever will. You can have clear goals, strong motivation, and even a defined purpose. But if your surroundings constantly pull you in the opposite direction, you will struggle to stay consistent. This is why controlling your environment is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Most people rely on willpower to stay on track. They try to resist distractions, avoid bad habits, and push themselves to do the right thing, all while remaining in the same environment that created those habits in the first place. That approach is exhausting. Willpower is limited, and when you use it constantly, it weakens over time. A controlled environment reduces the need for willpower. It makes the right actions easier and the wrong actions harder. Instead of fighting yourself every day, you design a space where focus, discipline, and progress become the natural outcome. Start by observing your current environment. Look at where you spend most of your time. Your room, your workspace, the people around you, the digital spaces you engage with. Each of these elements is influencing your behavior, often without you noticing. If your workspace is cluttered, your mind will feel scattered. If your phone is filled with distractions, your attention will be divided. If the people around you lack direction, it becomes harder for you to stay focused on yours. These are not small details. They are powerful forces that shape your daily actions. Controlling your environment begins with removing friction. Anything that makes it harder for you to do what matters should be minimized or eliminated. If you want to focus, create a space that supports focus. Clean your workspace. Remove unnecessary items. Keep only what you need for the task in front of you. At the same time, increase friction for distractions. Don't keep your phone within reach when you're trying to work. Log out of apps that pull your attention. Make it slightly inconvenient to engage in habits that don't serve you. These small barriers create a pause, and that pause gives you the chance to make a better decision. Your digital environment is just as important as your physical one. What you consume daily affects how you think. Constant exposure to noise, comparison, and irrelevant information weakens your clarity. It fills your mind with distractions before you even begin your work. Curate what you allow into your space. Be intentional about the content you engage with. Not everything deserves your attention. And if something consistently pulls you away from your goals, it doesn't belong in your environment. People are another critical part of your environment. The individuals you interact with regularly influence your mindset, your standards, and your behavior. This doesn't mean you need to cut everyone off, but it does mean you need to be aware of how those interactions affect you. If you surround yourself with people who are focused, disciplined, and growth-oriented, their behavior sets a standard. It challenges you to elevate your own actions. On the other hand, if your environment normalizes distraction, procrastination, or negativity, it becomes harder to maintain a different path. Control doesn't always mean changing everything at once. Sometimes it means creating pockets of control, a specific time, a specific place where your environment is fully aligned with your goals. Even a few hours of focused work in the right setting can be more powerful than an entire day in the wrong one. Consistency in your environment also matters. When your surroundings are stable, your mind adapts. It begins to associate certain places and conditions with certain actions. A clean desk becomes a signal for focus. A quiet space becomes a signal for deep work. These associations reduce resistance and make it easier to begin. Routines are built on this principle. When your environment supports your routine, you don't have to think as much. You move through your actions with less effort because the cues around you guide your behavior. Another important aspect is reducing decision fatigue. If your environment is disorganized or unpredictable, you spend more time deciding what to do next. That constant decision-making drains your mental energy. A controlled environment simplifies choices. It creates clarity. Preparation is part of this control. Set up your space in advance. Know what you're going to work on. Remove anything that might interrupt you. When you begin your work, everything should already be in place. There will still be challenges. No environment is perfect, and you won't always have complete control over your surroundings. But even small adjustments can create a significant difference. The goal is not perfection, it is alignment. Alignment between your environment and your intentions. Because when those two are connected, your actions become more consistent. You stop relying on bursts of effort and start operating within a system that supports your growth. And over time, that system shapes your identity. You become someone who is organized, focused, and intentional. Not because you forced yourself to be that way, but because your environment made it easier to live that way. Your surroundings are always influencing you, whether you notice it or not. The question is whether they are pushing you forward or holding you back. And once you take control of that, you stop leaving your progress to chance. Extreme ownership begins the moment you stop blaming anything outside of yourself for where you are. Not because everything is your fault, but because taking responsibility is the only way you gain control. As long as the cause of your situation exists outside of you, the solution will always feel out of reach. Most people operate from a place of partial ownership. They take credit when things go well, but when things fall apart, they look outward. They point to circumstances, other people, lack of opportunity, bad timing. And while those factors may be real, focusing on them keeps you stuck. Because blame is passive. It justifies inaction. It gives you a reason to stay the same. Extreme ownership is different. It shifts your focus from what happened to what you can do about it. It removes excuses, not because life is fair, but because progress requires responsibility. This mindset is uncomfortable at first. It forces you to confront your own decisions, your own habits, your own patterns. It asks you to admit that where you are right now is, in many ways, the result of what you have consistently done or avoided. That level of honesty is not easy. It challenges your ego. It removes the comfort of external justification. But it also gives you something powerful in return: control. Because once you accept that your actions play a central role in your outcomes, you realize that change is possible. Not dependent on luck or approval, but on what you choose to do next. Extreme ownership means taking responsibility for your time. How you spend it, how you waste it, how you prioritize it. It means recognizing that every hour has value, and that value is determined by how you use it. It also means taking responsibility for your energy, the way you manage your focus, your attention, your habits. If you feel constantly drained, distracted, or unproductive, the question is not just why it's happening, but what you are allowing to continue. Ownership extends to your decisions. Every choice you make, even the small ones, contributes to your direction. Skipping a task, delaying action, choosing comfort over effort. These are not isolated moments. They are patterns that shape your results over time. When you adopt extreme ownership, you stop seeing these moments as insignificant. You start seeing them as opportunities to align your actions with your goals. It also applies to your mindset. The way you interpret situations, the stories you tell yourself, the beliefs you hold. If you constantly reinforce the idea that things are difficult, unfair, or out of your control, your actions will reflect that. Ownership challenges those narratives. It asks you to question whether your perspective is helping or limiting you. And if it's limiting, it becomes your responsibility to change it. Another key aspect is accountability without supervision, doing what needs to be done, even when no one is watching, even when there are no immediate consequences. Because true ownership is internal. It's not driven by external pressure. This is where character is built. In the quiet moments where you have the option to take the easy path or the necessary one. Extreme ownership also removes entitlement. The expectation that results should come without consistent effort. That opportunity should appear without preparation. That success should be easier than it is. Instead, it replaces entitlement with responsibility. You earn progress through action. You create opportunities through consistency. You build results through discipline. It changes how you respond to setbacks. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? You ask, what can I learn from this? Instead of focusing on the problem, you focus on the response. Because setbacks are inevitable. Mistakes will happen, plans will fail. But ownership ensures that these moments become lessons instead of stopping points. It also strengthens your standards. When you hold yourself accountable, your expectations increase. You don't accept less from yourself because you know what you are capable of. And that standard influences everything: your work ethic, your habits, your decisions. There will be times when taking ownership feels unfair, when circumstances genuinely work against you, when things don't go as planned despite your effort. But even in those moments, ownership keeps you moving forward because it focuses on what you can control, not what you can't. And control is where progress exists. When you fully embrace this mindset, something shifts. You stop waiting for permission. You stop looking for external validation. You stop depending on perfect conditions. You begin to act with intention. You take responsibility for your direction, your growth, your results. And that responsibility becomes a source of strength. Not pressure, not burden, but clarity. Because when everything becomes your responsibility, everything also becomes within your influence. And that is where real power begins. Execution is where everything becomes real. Ideas, plans, intentions, they all mean nothing without action. You can have clarity, purpose, and discipline. But if you don't execute consistently, nothing changes. Progress is not built on what you think about doing. It's built on what you actually do every single day. Most people spend too much time preparing and not enough time acting. They wait for the perfect plan, the right timing, the ideal conditions. They believe that once everything is aligned, execution will be easy. But that moment rarely comes. And even when it does, it doesn't last. Execution doesn't require perfection. It requires movement. Imperfect action taken consistently will always outperform perfect plans that never leave your mind. This is why daily execution matters. Not occasional effort, not bursts of productivity, but consistent action. Every day becomes an opportunity to move forward, even if the progress feels small. Small actions compound. A single day might not seem significant, but repeated over time, those actions create momentum. And momentum is powerful. It makes the next step easier. It reduces resistance. It builds confidence. But consistency is where most people struggle, not because they lack ability, but because they lack structure. Without a clear system, execution becomes dependent on mood, energy, and external circumstances. To execute daily, you need clarity. You need to know exactly what needs to be done, not a vague idea, but specific actions. When your tasks are unclear, your mind looks for ways to avoid them. It hesitates, overthinks, and delays. Clarity removes that hesitation. When you know what to do, you can start immediately. It also helps to reduce the scale of your tasks. Large goals can feel overwhelming, which creates resistance. Breaking them down into smaller, manageable steps makes execution easier. Instead of focusing on the entire journey, you focus on the next action. And that's enough, because progress is not about doing everything at once. It's about doing the next thing consistently. Another important factor is timing. Choose a specific time for your work and treat it as non-negotiable. When execution becomes part of your routine, it requires less effort to begin. You don't rely on motivation. You follow a schedule. This is where discipline and execution connect. Discipline ensures you show up. Execution ensures you make that time count. There will be days when you don't feel like working. Days when your energy is low, your focus is weak, and your mind is distracted. Those are the moments that define your consistency. Because execution is not about feeling ready. It's about acting despite not feeling ready. On those days, lower the intensity if you need to, but don't break the chain. Do something even if it's less than your best. Because stopping completely is what breaks momentum. Momentum is fragile. It builds slowly but can be lost quickly. And once it's lost, restarting feels harder than continuing. Execution also requires focus. Multitasking reduces efficiency and increases mistakes. When you work on multiple things at once, your attention is divided, and divided attention produces weaker results. Focus on one task at a time. Give it your full attention. Complete it, then move to the next. This approach not only improves quality, but also builds a sense of progress. Finishing tasks creates momentum. It reinforces the habit of execution. Tracking your actions can also help, not to create pressure, but to create awareness. When you see what you've completed, it builds confidence. When you notice gaps, it gives you a chance to adjust. Execution is not always exciting. In fact, most of it is repetitive, doing the same actions over and over without immediate rewards. This is where many people lose interest. They chase novelty instead of consistency. But transformation is not found in constant change. It's found in repeated effort. Repetition builds mastery. It strengthens your skills. It improves your efficiency. And over time, what once required effort becomes natural. Execution also teaches you more than planning ever will. When you act, you get feedback. You see what works and what doesn't. You adjust, refine, and improve. Without execution, you stay in theory. With execution, you move into reality. There will be obstacles, unexpected problems, interruptions, setbacks. They are part of the process. Waiting for a perfect path is another form of delay. Execution means adapting. It means continuing, even when things don't go as planned, because progress is not linear. It moves forward through action, not perfection. And when you commit to daily execution, something changes. You stop thinking of yourself as someone who wants to improve. You start seeing yourself as someone who takes action. That identity shift is powerful. It reinforces your behavior. It makes execution part of who you are. And over time, the gap between where you are and where you want to be starts to close. Not because you waited for the right moment, but because you created progress every single day. Consistency is what separates temporary effort from real transformation. Anyone can perform at a high level for a short period of time. Anyone can push hard for a day, a week, even a month. But very few people can sustain that effort long enough to create lasting change. That's where consistency becomes the defining factor. Perfection is often the standard people chase, but it's also the reason they fail. Because perfection is unrealistic. It demands that every action be flawless, every day be productive, every step be executed without mistakes. And the moment that standard is broken, motivation drops, frustration builds, and progress stops. Consistency operates differently. It doesn't require you to be perfect. It requires you to keep going. This shift in focus changes everything. Instead of asking whether you performed at your best, you ask whether you showed up. Instead of measuring success by flawless execution, you measure it by repeated effort, because repeated effort is what creates results. When you aim for perfection, you become overly critical of yourself. Small mistakes feel like failures. Missed days feel like the end of progress. This mindset creates pressure, and pressure often leads to avoidance. Consistency removes that pressure. It allows room for imperfection while maintaining direction. It accepts that some days will be better than others, but it doesn't allow those differences to stop the process. This is what makes it sustainable. Sustainability is often overlooked, but it's essential. A routine that works for a few days but collapses under pressure is not effective. A system that demands too much too quickly will eventually break. Consistency focuses on what can be maintained over time. It values steady progress over dramatic but short-lived effort. This is why small actions matter. They may not seem impressive, but they are repeatable. And repeatability is what builds momentum. Momentum is created when actions are performed consistently enough that they start to feel natural. You don't have to force yourself as much. The resistance decreases, the habit strengthens, and once a habit is established, progress accelerates. Consistency also builds trust, not from others, but from yourself. Every time you follow through, you reinforce the belief that you can rely on your own actions. That belief is powerful because it affects how you approach challenges. When you trust yourself, you hesitate less. You doubt less. You act with more confidence because you have evidence of your own reliability. On the other hand, inconsistency weakens that trust. When your actions are unpredictable, your confidence becomes unstable. You're never sure if you'll follow through, and that uncertainty affects your performance. Consistency removes that uncertainty. It also simplifies decision-making. When something becomes part of your routine, you don't have to think about it as much. You don't debate whether to act. You simply do it because it's what you always do. This reduces mental fatigue and makes it easier to maintain progress. Another important aspect is resilience. Consistency teaches you how to recover quickly. When you miss a day or make a mistake, you don't overanalyze it. You return to your routine as soon as possible. Because the focus is not on the mistake, it's on continuing. This ability to reset quickly is what keeps you moving forward. Without it, small setbacks turn into long delays. Consistency also protects you from extremes. It prevents burnout caused by overexertion and stagnation caused by inactivity. It keeps your effort balanced. This balance is important because transformation is not a sprint. It's a process that requires time. And time rewards those who remain steady. There will be moments when progress feels slow, when the results are not visible, when it seems like your effort is not making a difference. These are the moments where consistency matters most, because visible results are often delayed. The work you put in today may not show immediately, but it is contributing to future outcomes. Consistency allows you to continue even without immediate validation. It also shifts your focus from outcomes to process. Instead of obsessing over results, you concentrate on the actions that lead to those results. This reduces anxiety and increases effectiveness. Over time, these consistent actions begin to compound. Small improvements add up, skills develop, habits strengthen. And the version of you that once struggled becomes someone who operates with discipline and clarity. This transformation is not sudden, it's gradual. It happens through repetition, not intensity. And that's what makes it lasting, because anything built quickly without consistency tends to collapse just as quickly. Consistency builds a foundation, a stable base that supports long-term growth. And when that foundation is strong, you don't need to rely on bursts of motivation or moments of perfection. You rely on the fact that you will continue, regardless of how you feel, regardless of how long it takes,